Welcome to Cat Yak, where all our reviews are chosen by evil cats. I'm Beast. Let's start. Today's movie was chosen by the Grand Moppet. It is the 1996 PM Entertainment VHS release of Dark Breed. I found this movie half buried in the Grand Moppet's litter box, and honestly, I kind of wish I would have left it there. I had two really big problems with this movie. First off, I had a technical issue with it. Now, I'm watching the VHS version of this movie, so the main problem was there was a tiny crease running down the length of tape, and this caused a gargled popping sound to come out of the right speaker of my surround sound. This garbled popping sound was one of the reasons it took me over a week to completely watch this movie. The second problem I had was, unfortunately, the movie itself. It plays like something you would expect to see on late night cable in the early 90s. Now, don't take me wrong. If you're looking for an action movie with lots of action and a little bit of sci-fi horror thrown in, go ahead, give this movie a shot. My biggest complaint with it is the dialogue. In some of the scenes, the dialogue is extremely stiff and stilted, so it kind of pulls you out of the scenes. So let's go ahead and look at the movie. It starts off like most early 80s horror movies start off with two horny teenagers making out in a car. Then overhead you see a US NASA space shuttle crashing. It lands in a small dock area. Suddenly, the area is swarmed by the black uniformed military type people, and we find out that everyone on the crew has been infected. So you get a generic scene of a bunch of military people running around with a hovercraft that's just kind of floating in the middle of the water. And then you have a pod that nobody notices shoot overhead like a falling star. So a few neck snaps and random fight scenes later, it's 14 minutes into the movie and I literally have no clue what's going on at all. It's been mostly action scenes and car chases. Granted, the first car chase is pretty awesome. They have a whole fight in the back of a half of a double wide trailer house being pulled down the freeway, and the one guy almost gets thrown out into oncoming traffic. Other than that, I still have no clue what's going on. Although we do finally get to see what these infected astronauts look like, and surprise, surprise, they're perfectly normal. Unfortunately, they have bright yellow reptile eyes, and kudos to the costume department. Their space jumpsuits are basically tan jumpsuits with giant US flags sewn on their back. And like I mentioned before, this movie has a big thing about letting the generic main hero being thrown through plate glass and hanging off of moving vehicles. So, flashback to the pod nobody saw land, and we have a bum come up to it and push a few buttons. The pod opens, revealing several green pulsating eggs. He then gets shocked by a giant bolt of electricity and thrown across the room. Then we finally see the female astronaut, and she's riding around with this little box that apparently is an alien tracker. So we finally get introduced to our generic main hero, who has a tragic backstory that is stolen from another major movie franchise. And try and guess which one it belongs to, because this is it. Our strong and determined hero has a tragic past dealing with these alien organisms. During one of his last missions, he was the sole survivor. So he is recruited by a mysterious organization so that they can capture these killing machine aliens and weaponize them. Now, if you said the second Aliens movie with Sigourney Weaver, you would be correct. So, apparently the astronauts have been exposed to some alien virus. Unfortunately, our generic hero's ex-wife has also been exposed. So the shadowy Omega Corporation somehow manages to capture one of the infected male astronauts and then proceed to take him to what looks like a generic civilian hospital. And just as the medical officer leaves, the guy slowly starts to transform out into his alien appearance. Now, granted, this is the early 90s, but his weird little transformation thing looks like somebody discovered the plastic wrap tool in Photoshop for the first time. So the infected astronaut breaks out of the medical holding room, and there's this big sequence of him and the generic main hero fighting all the way through the hospital, breaking glass, being thrown through walls, stuff like that. And honestly, this alien guy is like the Energizer Bunny because he keeps going and going and going and just won't stop. So they finally get to the car garage and they finally shoot the guy infected with the alien, and then the ex-wife pops up and sets the guys on fire because apparently aliens are worried about leaving traces as well. She ends up using a secret code word that only her ex-husband can figure out and then escapes. There's some generic military dialogue here, and then they have the medical officer start cutting open the infected, and then they have the medical officer start cutting open the burned remains of the infected astronaut right there in the parking garage. And for some reason, he bleeds pretty dang good if he's been cooked. Then we have our second alien ripoff with this mutilated chest burster blowing up out of the burned corpse's body. The medical examiner freaks out with the, "I didn't sign up for this." So fast forward a little bit, and we finally get to hear the generic main hero's tragic backstory. And honestly, his backstory makes this movie sound like it should be a sequel. And the first movie should be better than this. Unfortunately, this movie is the only movie in the series. We also get to learn more about the evil Omega Corporation and their plan about turning the aliens into war machines. We learn more things about the aliens, like when the alien conscious has to sleep, the humans are actually able to control their body, and apparently the humans are extremely strong in this state, mentally speaking. Well, then we get to meet back with the bum from earlier, who is harassed by a bunch of high school punk and is saved by the infected aliens. So he takes them to where the egg pod landed. Bounce back to the Omega Corporation, you start hearing more of what their plan was. And apparently, their plan was perfect. It was the execution of it by the astronauts that was flawed. We also see that apparently if you don't follow orders, they'll just slap you. So the main hero ends up becoming wanted by the Omega Corporation, so he runs off and decides to hide in the hotel mentioned in his ex-wife's code. And I always thought this part was funny because, yeah, he's supposed to be hiding in this hotel and keeping a low profile, but they leave the windows wide open and he walks back and forth in front of them several times. So he goes to get some breakfast at a restaurant and he runs into his ex-wife, who's still wearing her astronaut jumpsuit. And yes, she has been infected as well. And she really wants some pizza. And apparently, according to the waitress, if you have bright yellow lizard eyes, oh, it just means you're really hungover. Then we learn something about the alien species. There are technically two groups. We have the evil dark breed, then we have the good watchers. And then the infected ex-wife says that if they can stop the dark breed in 38 hours, the alien inhabiting her body will gladly leave and then die. If it takes longer than 38 hours, the alien's going to mature and she will die while the alien takes over her body. We then have this cute little scene of the alien who infects the female astronaut's body. The astronaut herself and the generic main hero have a marriage squabble about what ruined their marriage and about her father's watch. At this point, I'm going to fast forward to almost towards the end of the movie because all that you're really missing is a few more action scenes and a couple of times where they basically rip off Battlefield Earth and pull a bazooka out of nowhere. This movie is only 99 minutes, but seriously, it feels like it takes forever to get over. So fast forward to where the evil corporation and our generic hero face off against the aliens at the hatching eggs. We finally get to see what these aliens look like. The main male astronaut fully transformed into the alien. And what it looks like is basically a green-bodied alien from Aliens and a predator head that looks flattened out with a large flip-top mouth and a prehensile tongue. I thought I was done with evil frog monsters. after Rana. So after finally pressing the last button on the egg pod that causes the eggs to self-destruct, our main generic hero pulls out a bazooka from nowhere and shoots the alien, destroying. At the end, they all go off and have pizza, even though he's wanted by every police force and military unit around the world. But surprise, apparently the movie's not. But is this the end? Surprise! The bum has a large green glowing orb in his throat as he walks away into the credits. I couldn't move fast enough to eject this movie out of my player. Now, it's not a bad movie, it's not really good either. I mean, yes, it has its high points. You can tell they really took the time to do the stunt work for this movie. They look good, they're really entertaining. The only problem is it seems like they blew all their budget on stunts and didn't have anything left for the script or the aliens themselves.